Paul Hickey is with us here today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Toby.
Now, can you just describe to us what it is that you do?
Well, I'm the co-founder and president of a new mask manufacturing company located in the United States. We make medical grade masks, surgical masks, N95s, and USA made KN95s.
Yeah. So, I mean, what's unique about your masks? Because I suppose a lot of people are just maybe buying any mask because I suppose people think anything will do.
Well, thanks for asking the question. There's a couple things. Number one, we have a special mask that's for the public and a lot of healthcare professionals that have these ultra soft ear loops. Now, have you worn a mask with a string ear loop and then your ears have started to hurt?
Not really, to be honest. I've had
Yeah.
masks where the ear lip has started to come off a bit, though.
Ah, well, a lot of people wear these string ear loop masks and that bothers their ears and hurts them. We have this super soft material. So that's one of the things that differentiates us is it eliminates the ear pain. The second thing, and probably the most important thing
Yeah.
is we have our own internal lab where we do all the testing that the FDA and NIOSH require to make sure that the masks meet the specs or exceed the specs on the box.
Yeah.
Now that is critical because just recently in the United States, the CDC announced that they just tested a bunch of Chinese masks. Over 60% of them failed to meet the specs on the box.
Wow.
This is not the first time they've announced this. And these are not just masks coming to the United States. These are Chinese masks being sent all over the world. The FDA and the CDC has multiple times announced tons of fake and counterfeit Chinese masks. And if you're actually wearing a mask for protection,
Yeah.
instead of just because it's a rule and you have to do it, if you're just wearing a mask because, I got to wear a mask, then, and you don't care about protecting yourself, then it doesn't matter what you buy.
Yeah.
If you do care and you are trying to protect yourself and you're a healthcare worker or you're at risk, then if you buy a Chinese mask, you're literally taking your life into your own hands. It's a risky venture. And so I would say even there are good masks coming out of China. The problem is it's impossible to know which ones are good and which ones are fake because there's so many fake ones.
Yeah. So what makes a good mask? What are the actual requirements for it to be effective at stopping COVID?
Well, so there's a material called spunbound, non-woven materials. There's certain materials that are used which have a breathability rating, so you can breathe through them, but they have a rating where they block. It's called PFE and BFE, particulate matter and bacterial matter. They have to block a high percentage of that, and that material is specifically made for masks and other kind of medical procedures. And you have to test it to make sure that it's the right kind and it's meeting the specs. And what the Chinese do is that they use the proper material to get approved, and then they switch it out to inferior material to save money so that they no longer actually protects the consumer. And they've done this over and over and over again. And every time they get caught, they just change the name on the box and use an address down the street and keep doing it.
Yeah.
And so it's really the most important message I have is it doesn't matter whether you're buying a mask from Germany, England, the United States, Mexico, fine. But if you're buying one from China, you are at risk.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, we go to the extra length. Most mask manufacturers don't have an in-house lab. We're testing, we literally pull masks off of our line every 2 hours, test them to make sure that they're meeting the specs or exceeding them. So that's another thing that makes us different. We're really serious about it because this is a medical device. It's people are wearing it to protect their lives. Yeah, and it's really amazing that we continue to have this issue from the Chinese companies.
Yeah. And we've been hearing a lot, particularly recently, about the idea of double masking, that maybe, if you put two masks on, then that'll give you more protection. And I guess that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
But is it necessary?
Yeah. So so yes and no. Okay. It depends on the environment you're in and how much protection you want. Like some people need more protection than others. If you're old, you're older, if you're over 60, if you're not metabolically healthy, if you've got diabetes or cancer or heart issues, then you need a lot of protection. And so double masking is important. Now, over here in the States, the CDC about a month ago came out and said you should wear a 3-ply medical mask like the type we wear underneath your cloth mask. And the reason they did that is that the cloth mask, and of course it depends on the cloth, so I'm generalizing a little here, but generally speaking, cloth masks don't offer very much protection. And as an example, some MIT professors got together and they put this really interesting, sophisticated mathematical model together. And they said, okay, if you put one person that has COVID in a room that's 10 by 20 feet big, and there's 10 people in there, and nobody's wearing a mask, how long does it take to get COVID? Yeah. And the answer is 18 minutes. If you're wearing a cotton cloth mask, it takes 20 minutes. So you're only protected for 2 minutes. Yeah. If you're wearing a medical 3-ply mask like we make, it takes 4 hours.
Wow.
And if you wear an N95 mask, which is what, the healthcare frontline workers are working, then it takes 14 hours. And so it just depends. If you need more protection, then double masking actually does make a difference. But you want to get these medical masks like us and a lot of other companies sell. The cloth masks are really limited in how much they protect you.
And what's the reason for that? Because that suggests to me that the longer you spend in a room with someone with COVID, the more likely you are to get it. But then surely, even if you just spend 5 minutes close with someone with COVID, you're gonna catch it probably.
Yeah, no, Toby, excellent question. So a couple things here. And this is the public, your listeners need to know the answer to this question. This is really important, okay? So number one, to get COVID, you have to get a certain amount of viral load. You have to get a certain amount of it. If you just get small amounts, you typically won't catch it. Now, just to highlight that, but by the way, I want to just share some metadata with you. So last year in the springtime, when the cruise ships were still out and they hadn't figured out that they needed to shut down, 2 cruise ships broke out with COVID. One of them gave everybody masks and the other one didn't have masks. And then they tested everyone that was coming off those cruise ships. The one that didn't have masks, about the same amount of percentage of people on each ship got COVID, interestingly enough, about half. I think it was about half. It's been a little while since I've seen this tip. But out of the half that got it on each cruise ship, the one without masks, only about 10% of the people that tested positive were asymptomatic, meaning they showed no symptoms, but they tested positive for it. Yeah. On the cruise ship with the masks, 80% of all the people that tested positive were asymptomatic. Now, what's the reason for that? It's because the mask blocked partially the viral load. And so they got a much smaller viral load. They got enough for your immune system to go, oh, we need to attack this and fight against it, but they didn't get enough to get ill. And so it's, the article that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine on this particular case was titled something like, the poor man's vaccine, meaning, wear a mask and get exposed, and then you don't need a vaccine because you'll be asymptomatic and have the. Now, by the way, I am not suggesting to anybody to go intentionally, expose yourself to someone with COVID with a mask. Please don't do that. But basically it highlights this, how much viral load you need. And one other quick example, there was a company, high-rise building. They had 2 floors, the 7th and the 8th floor. A lot of people on the 7th floor, half the people on the 7th floor broke out with COVID, and only 1 or 2 people on the 8th floor. Even though the 8th floor employees were coming down to the 7th floor and visiting and having meetings, hardly anybody got it, because you have to get a certain amount before you're going to catch it. And so this is the highlight of the question, do masks work? Well, yes, they do. Of course, they're going to minimize the viral load, and they're either going to completely protect you from it, or maybe you'll get a small amount so you're asymptomatic, which is really an ideal scenario.
So that explains why a lot of nurses are dying, because they're spending all day basically in COVID wards.
Well, I have 2. So yes. And the other sad news is they're probably wearing masks that don't meet the specs on the box and not getting the protection they think. And so this is where I need the buyers, the hospital buyers, the people buying masks for their employees. You need to either batch test the Chinese masks you're getting, which nobody will do, to make sure that they meet the specs, or you need to be buying European manufactured, American manufactured, anywhere, if you want to really protect your employees and frontline workers. Yeah.
And here's a question. How can we be sure that you're not a fraud as well?
Well, the chances are we're in the United States. We're regulated by the FDA. Like I said, if a Chinese company does something wrong, basically nothing happens to them. If we do something wrong, not only do we get fined, we can have our business shut down, sued, and go to jail.
Ooh,
so
doesn't sound good.
Yeah, no, I mean, and by the way, anybody is welcome to come to our factory for a tour. I know you're on the other side of the pond, but we welcome people to come in and see our lab, see what we do, how we do it. We're very transparent.
Yeah.
And you can see that on our website at PuraVita.com. You can see the company and what we do.
But just make sure if you're coming along to the factory to wear a mask, of course.
Of course, right. And if you're coming to visit us, our factory, just let me know. We'll send you some masks for free.
Yeah. And also, throughout this past year, there's still a lot of people, a minority, I'd hope, but they're still refusing to accept that masks work.
Yeah.
What would you say to them?
Well, look, here in the United States, there's a group of people that don't think masks work because of Dr. Fauci. Early in the pandemic, he said, oh, yeah, masks don't work. You don't need to wear a mask, because he did it intentionally deceiving the American people so that we wouldn't hoard masks so that the frontline workers would have enough. And then he came out and he said, oh, well, hey, just kidding. Masks really do protect you. And of course they do. Why do you think surgeons have been wearing them for 50 years?
Yeah.
You know? And so there's reason for public confusion. And I sympathize with that. And I understand it, because some leaders have misled the public. So it's totally understandable. But, look, the example I gave about cruise ships should be really good metadata to people to go, wait a minute, there is something here. And just common science has been able to demonstrate that you're blocking virus going out of your mouth and you're blocking it coming in when you have a mask. It's not really difficult to prove that. It's very simple, in fact.
Yeah. And when they look back on this in 10 years' time, the worst case scenario is that masks didn't help much. They're not going to come back and say, well, the masks actually made it worse.
Yeah, well, that's that's true. Now, I will tell you that a lot of the mask regulation, you may be surprised to hear this coming from a mask manufacturer, but there's a lot of regulations in the United States, and I think in Europe too, that have gone way overboard in terms of wearing masks. For example, they basically don't offer any additional protection when you're outside. I see people walking on trails in the mountains here in Utah with a mask on, and I just, I don't say anything to them, but the reality is the viral load outside, if you're standing next to a person with COVID, is almost zero, even if you don't have a mask on. So our government officials just made this whole thing way harder and way worse than it needs to be. If you're indoors, yes. If you're in a closed group with a lot of people, absolutely. If you're outdoors, silly, just completely silly.
Yeah. Well, if we're interested in buying your masks or just checking them out, where are we able to find them?
Yeah, you can go to our website at PuraVita.com. I'll spell it. It's PURA, V as in Victor, IT as in Tom, A, PuraVita.com. And by the way, Toby, I set up a discount code for your audience. If anybody that listens to this, there's a place to put in a discount code, and you just put in Toby, T-O-B-Y, they'll get a 10% discount.
Well, that's very nice of you to do that. And thank you very much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk about it and hopefully help people get masks that actually protect them.